I hate to be the one to break up the kind of festive atmosphere, the party-like vibe in here today. It's great energy. It's lovely to see you all. My name is Charles Waldheim, and I am one half of the directorship of the Master Design Studies program here at the GSD. On behalf of our Dean, Sarah Whiting, and the school, we're very happy that you're with us here today. For those of you joining us online as well, you might know I have a QR code here. We do have closed captioning available for the live stream. Before we begin today's program, we wanted to start with a couple of notes about upcoming programs. Tomorrow, Joint Center for Housing Studies will be holding a symposium on the context or landscape of social housing in New England. And then next Wednesday, we'll have a very special event. Brian Goldstein will come back to the school to deliver a talk on the work of Max Bond, These Contradictory Things, on the moment of the commemoration of the J. Max Bond room just over here in Gund Hall. It's a great pleasure to welcome back to the school Ximena Caminos. For those of you that have followed Ximena's career, you may know that, of course, she has blazed a kind of singular trail, really a singularity, a one of one in the role of public art curation in the formation of cultural districts across the Americas. As creative director, the visionary behind the Faena Group, both in Buenos Aires and in Miami, she's really transformed our understanding of public art and the role of design at the highest level. More recently, you've known her as a visionary planner associated with the Underline in Miami, and most recently, her audacious adventure off the coast of Miami Beach, the ReefLine, that we're going to learn more about. After her presentation, she'll be joined by Pedro Alonzo. Pedro Alonzo is a curator based here in Cambridge who has an extensive international record of extraordinary public art installations in a variety of venues. Most recently, he's the artistic director of the Boston Public Art Triennial that opens like in a couple of weeks. Yeah. Pedro's often been nice enough also to join us as a visiting member of our faculty this year, where he's taught a course for our MDes candidates on curation in the public realm. Ximena Caminos.
Thank you. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me here. I'm honored to be at this incredible school, and especially in these times where we must all stand together and unite, and culture is one of our biggest tools to, really fight for what we love. So before I start my presentation last night, I had these thoughts, and I want to read a few words about what I just said. To me, everything starts and ends in the ocean. The ReefLine is a creative act of renaissance and regeneration. At a time when environmental protection is being dismantled, climate agreements abandoned, and public trust in science eroded, the ReefLine rises not only as a solution but as a symbol. We choose creation. Where regulations are stripped away, we build structures where corals can regenerate. We build public access where walls were rising. We build wonder, memory, and awareness in a time of deliberate denial. To extraction, we offer restoration. To neglect, we offer care. To erasure, we offer presence, place, story, and permanence beneath the waves. The ReefLine is a radical counter-narrative. It forces alliances between artists, scientists, engineers, architects, and communities. It reclaims imagination as a form of civic infrastructure. And it demonstrates that when the machinery of governance fails, culture can intervene, not as an ornament, but as a catalyst. In an age overflowing with data, yet starved for action, we propose a different frame. Information alone does not inspire change, but meaning does. Through storytelling, cultural practice, and embodied knowledge, we translate complex science into shared emotional understanding and collective responsibility. Neuroscience now confirms what artists have always known. Empathy and narrative move people much faster than numbers do. Some financial numbers, though. Not all numbers. So we ask, what would it take for ocean stewardship to become a shared cultural norm? not a burdensome response to catastrophe, but a joyful, life-affirming practice woven into our daily lives. This is our vision, to reposition ocean care, not just as a technical or ecological necessity, but as a cultural imperative, a creative, inclusive, and regenerative act that begins, like the ReefLine, from the bottom of the sea and rises with intention. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so like Charles said, I'm going to share how did I get myself into this complexity. I was born in Argentina. I grew up in the Pampas, horseback riding, climbing trees, and art was always my world. I started very young, and I wanted to be an artist, but I realized I wasn't a genius. And I did realize that other people were so much better than me at their artistic practice. But I recognized I had the gift of seeing talent in others and assembling incredible teams of people who could collaborate in making impacts that sometimes transcend the arts. So I started working in public art and the public sphere because cities have been my passion. And I used art as a way to raise awareness about topics and things that I thought were important. For example, I brought Jenny Holzer to Buenos Aires and we projected on the obelisk all the letters of the mothers of the disappeared during the military government. So that type of very strong political art. These are just some few examples in Miami. I ended up working in designing master plans for large-scale cultural districts and for public spaces, mainly cultural master plans. But being in Miami, I realized that, I'm going to go here, that climate change was something that was hitting the city very hard, especially sea level rise and warming sea temperatures. There. And I realized that despite I love the art so much, I needed to take my own practice a step beyond and put the power of the arts at the service of something that I consider more important, which is the climate crisis we're all facing, which in the end, it all boils down also to a lot of inequality. So with asking the right questions, I arrived to the spark or the glimpse of the idea of the ReefLine, which is to me one of the most interesting things happening in Miami right now. So with this crazy idea, I wrote it down and I presented it to Knight Foundation. And we won the Knight's Art Challenge Award. With that seed fund, we unlocked a permit that once existed in Miami Beach because, let me go here, Miami Beach is a man-made island and very bad sand replenishment projects smothered all the fringe reef that once existed there. So the mayor called us and offered us to be part of what's called a government obligation bond, which is a type of bond that a city issues, and they go to Wall Street, and they get funding for a bond where citizens decide to tax themselves to make certain things happen. So this was a cultural bond where we were included and declared an anchor institution despite not even existing and being underwater, which was very lucky of us to actually get 70% yes of the votes from the citizens of Miami Beach. And we got a $5 million grant, which kickstarted the whole thing because the city, in a way, became our angel investor. So I like this concept of New York has the High Line, and Miami has the Underline, and Miami Beach one day will have the ReefLine very soon. This is an interesting comparison. So the High Line is very little and costs a lot. And then the Underline is kind of very big and also costs a lot. We are 7 miles long, or that's our ambition. We're not 7 miles long yet. And we created a 7 to 10-year master plan in order to protect all the shore in Miami Beach because it really needs protection. It's a city where hurricanes hit very hard. Sea level rise is a reality. So let me show you. How do I pause the video, Matt? Hold on. I want to show you this video because it's easier to understand what I'm talking about with moving image. So it's a 1-minute video that has a little bit of sound. This is the structure you're seeing. It was designed by OMA. The star, you're going to be able to see it from an airplane because you actually can see reefs from above. And today we're going to speak about marine acupuncture, which is the repurposing of a concept by Jaime Lerner, who spoke a lot about urban acupuncture, and we adapted that practice to the oceans. And I'll go into it in a minute. This is a type of life a little bit more colorful than the one we're going to have. I will show you the corals that will grow in our structures. But basically the ReefLine is a 7-mile-long underwater sculpture park running parallel to the shore at 600 to 900 feet of distance and 20 feet deep. What we're doing is we're enhancing marine habitat. We are creating structures that are supporting life and very much corals, because when the coral dies, the corals are about location, location, location. Our coral scientist says they are the first real estate developers of the ocean because they're actually like cities. And they live and they breathe through photosynthesis with a symbiosis with an algae. And if they're not at the right distance from the water, they can't photosynthesize and they die. So why Miami Beach? The canary in the coal mine. As I said before, Miami Beach is ground zero sea level rise. When we have a storm, I've literally seen an octopus come out of the sewer in the middle of the city. So that happens in Miami. It's a very fragile ecosystem. In South Florida, also, Army Corps of Engineers, the ports, there's a lot of dredging going on for different reasons that are related to the built environment. And there's more and more consciousness going into these developments, but many times they've been developed with a lack of consciousness. There's actually now an active lawsuit that Miami Waterkeeper won, where 234 hectares of reef were buried under sand sediment after the dredging of the Miami port. So these hybrid reefs are really necessary. Why Miami also? Miami is a very interesting city because it's small and it has a very, I think, visionary leadership. Because the fact that they supported something like the ReefLine tells me that they think out of the box. When I came to them, they thought I was crazy. But despite that, they supported me, and that was great, you know? And I think it's because I had the track record of doing the final district in Miami and in Buenos Aires, so they knew that I could handle large-scale projects, but it was a leap of faith. Still is. So what is marine acupuncture? Marine acupuncture is providing nature a platform to thrive on. Marine acupuncture is picking site-specific locations and working with nature to enhance that environment. To me, it's very important that we go beyond marine acupuncture, though, because ReefLine is underwater, but we need to come out of the water and make the invisible visible and connect to a larger audience because of what we just said. Ultimately, ReefLine is an example of how human ingenuity, when we come together and work in a cross-disciplinary way, we can achieve incredible things together. And we aim to be that. We want to be that. We don't want to be just an underwater sculpture park. So what is the ReefLine? I said it before, it's a 7-mile-long underwater sculpture park. We are a 501c3, and we're permanently trying to inform and influence policy, because there's a lot of lack of policy when it comes to underwater. And right now we're living in very turbulent times. The Deep Sea Mining Treaty will be signed very soon. There's a new director for the ISA, the International Seabed Authority, and we are in an era where a lot of things are being dismantled. So to us, in a poetical way, we want to lay a coral mantle on top of the oceans and protect where it needs. So that's what we consider marine acupuncture. This is our phase 1 and 2. We are in this little red square. Phase 1 will be giving an afterlife to Order of Importance, which is Leandro Ehrlich's traffic jam. They're made of this incredible new marine-grade concrete. And as I was saying before, in this conceptual graphic that you see, we are a snorkel trail, we are a marine sanctuary, we are a research and educational platform. I'll share some images of our coral laboratory in a bit. We are hybrid reef technology, ecological restoration, and of course, civic infrastructure. What's the impact? We're restoring the Florida Reef Tract, or part of it. The Florida Reef Tract is the third largest in the world. The Florida Reef Tract also is the only one alive in the US and attached to continental platform. 90% of the reef is lost, which is incredible. And, but next to the reef line, incredibly, a new reef has been discovered, which is thriving. And I will show some images. And these are the corals that we are there to try to protect and support. And our ambition is to take them 7 miles long and plant 1 million corals, at least. So we're developing new technologies. And we're working with a lot of very interesting institutions, universities. We're part of something that's called the Climate Ready Tech Hub, which is a hub that was created in Miami. All PhDs working on ocean solutions. Very interesting. So, and I think this is why Sarah, we had lunch together in Miami, and I was telling her about the ReefLine, and I think this is what she liked. Because she said, you know, Harvard is a very diverse school. We have like 19 STEMs, and I think that ReefLine taps into so many of them, because it really does take a village. When I started the ReefLine, I wasn't aware of the complexity of the ReefLine. And I think that if I would have been, I would have probably been intimidated. I don't know if I would have been able to approach it. So innocence is bliss. We need federal government, the state, the municipalities, the counties, the elected officials, the governing agencies, policymakers, tech, corporate, cultural, educational, science, the nonprofit sector. And just to give an idea of how complex everything is, in order for us to receive our grant, which is a Miami Beach grant, the $5 million, which is for Miami Beach institutions, because we're underwater, we're not in Miami Beach. So both cities had to sign an interlocal agreement, Miami-Dade and Miami Beach, in order for us to be able, and it took, how long, Brandy, 2 years of lawyers? 2 years of lawyers. So I like to say it's where disciplines don't just coexist, they co-create, because we are in the pathless path, the uncharted territory. So what is our strategy? As I said before, I think we have to have an amphibious strategy. ReefLine needs to come out of the water and have a foot on the land and a foot on the shore. The water is where our hybrid reef lives. So this is what I'm going to show you first. As I said before, we have phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. Leandro Ehrlich is, to me, one of the most interesting contemporary artists of the world. He's also a dear, dear friend. And the type of artists that we work with at ReefLine, they're not regular, practice artists. They have to be artists that are patient and willing to make modifications and be willing to work with engineers and be willing to hear a lot of feedback and make alterations. It has taken us 2 years to understand how to make Leandro's cars. And our fabricator is back there right now, Brian. So I'm excited he's here. So concrete coral is the afterlife of this sand traffic jam that we made. We co-curated with Brandy Reddick, my executive director, in 2019. And it spoke about carbon emissions. And when ReefLine came about, we thought, why don't we give this incredible artwork an afterlife and make it our first deployment? So we asked Leandro if he would be willing to do it, and he said yes. He called it concrete coral, and 22 of these structures are being made in New Haven. We're 3D printing molds and then casting, and they're very complicated. So this is a layout of how they will be seen underwater. And this is the type of things that we have to do before deploying. So we go to the University of Miami. There is a tank there. It's called the Sustain Tank. And there you can simulate category 5 or 1 in a 500-year storm, and we test our structures. So we test them for stability. Also, the surfers were concerned that our structures might ruin their waves in Miami, so we went to the tank and showed that there's no wave ruining and everything is perfect. And we love going above and beyond. This is not required by the state, but we think we are very responsible. And putting things in the ocean of this scale needs a lot of consciousness. So we studied the coral, the concrete coral cars with what's called the coral locks. This is a UN patent, and it's a faster and more practical way of outplanting coral. So, like a beautiful, artwork, these cars have these little things that people will actually also be able to go adopt and plant themselves. Because in the end, we want people to embrace the project and to become agents of change themselves, right? So we want to educate. We don't want to be a tourism attraction. We want to be an educational experience. Heart of Okeanos is the heart of a blue whale. So this is a real size of the heart of a blue whale, what you're seeing right now. So this heart was scanned, a blue whale washed ashore, and it was scanned by the University of Ontario. And Petroc managed to 3D print it in a material that is a carbon sink material. So this is the original that we have at ReefLine. We're going to auction it now for the oceans at United Nations in the Ocean Conference in Nice. And then we blew it up a couple of times, because if we would just present it the way it is underwater, everything gets a little lost. It's very big underwater. So you need, the water does act like a lens, though. So things are bigger than they are, but despite that, they still look very small in the bottom of the sea. So I don't remember if it was like 3 or 4 times. This is the ideal marine habitat. Because, of course, we need holes, right? So marine life, we can't, if the reef dies, then the fish don't have anywhere to go and they get predated. So creating these marine habitats is critical to help biodiversity. Here it is. So 17 times 19 feet. This one is a 1 of 1. So this is not 3D printed or cast. This is an old school sculpture casting. So the Miami Reef Star. This is something I really love, because when I worked for the first time at FAENA with the office of Norman Foster, with Foster and Partners, I was impressed by a presentation that showed, like, Paris is the Eiffel Tower, and London is the Big Ben, and New York is the Statue of Liberty, and how, like, one thinks of symbols when one thinks of cities. So I was thinking, like, what is a symbol for Miami? And there's really none, except the beach, or maybe those pretty, like, lifeguard stations. So what more beautiful than our concept of marine acupuncture to give the city a new identity? Miami is an art mind city. So we commissioned Carlos Betancourt to create the Miami Reef Star. We want the city to stand out and highlight their vision of enhancing the marine environment. And we created this star, which is 90 feet wide. It's the size of 2 tennis courts, and it's all marine habitat. We love this star because also we think, Pedro was telling me, I love the fact that you say that the ReefLine is a snorkel trail. Because if you think about the experience, if you're underwater, the visibility, how do I find, like, from one reef to another? You could, get lost. So, like a really beautiful story tale, like Hansel and Gretel, and the 2 little brothers picking up candy to the house of the witch. We're sprinkling the ReefLine with stars that will take you from one reef to another. So we're enhancing, the stars will be the backbone of the ReefLine. This is more or less the scale of the stars. This is this is with what they make it, they 3D print them. And then our master planners. I worked a lot with Shohei Shigematsu and with OMA at the FAENA district, and I was very impressed by their approach as more like cultural analysts almost than architects. So I asked Shohei if he would undertake, the big job of being the ReefLine's master planner, and he said yes. And he said he was very excited because, architects have to deal with gravity, and he loved the idea that there was less gravity underwater, and that he found very exciting. So he first designed this Piranesian structure, which is impossible to deploy. It's a fantasy, because when we showed it to the city, they said no. But still, we kept it because we think it's so beautiful. And maybe, one day in Saudi, we might deploy it. We might deploy it there. But this is Shohei's first idea, an underwater forum that I totally fell in love with. Then OMA is designing these protective barriers, because in order to protect the art, we also want to create these protective barriers to somehow stop the sand movements, or because otherwise they'll be sunk. And we have an expert in sand back there, Sheila Puffer from Northeastern. So this is kind of what OMA imagined at the time. It's not what ReefLine will be like, but I thought it would be exciting, because we are in the School of Architecture and Design, to look at the thought process of OMA, of how they were building like these blocks and this backbone, and how they would lace all the ReefLine with these beautiful structures. These are coral topiaries, also by OMA. Then they studied all shapes and forms of marine life and designed these other ones that are really efficient, because you don't need a crane to deploy this. You can push them off the barge and they will naturally interlock. So a lot of what we are proposing would be very successful if it's scalable, durable, and I think OMA in that sense did an amazing job at finding easy, smart solutions to tackle some of the world's large problems, at least for coastal cities. So Blue Tech, this is our coral palette. This is what naturally grows there. So it's fun to tell Leandro, okay, you're not painting with oil and acrylic, but you have these colors that you can work with underwater. So these are our gorgonians and our soft corals that we grow in our coral nursery. And we're right now growing 2,200. But as I said before, our ambition is to outplant 1 million. These are really, really beautiful corals. The lights that are illuminating them are lights that they mimic sunlight. So they are now, when it's spawn season, we think they will spawn in captivity, which is something, coral science is relatively new. It's 20 years. So there's a lot of outbreaks happening all the time about coral science. These are our little coral logs, and this is what they look like. I showed this before. And this is, to us, climate-positive materials and how we're 3D printing the stars. These are being made in France. So we found this company that's called Litosis, created by this man that created an alternative to concrete. And they're working with a material that is a carbon sink, which is a really, really very low-impact carbon eco-concrete. We are very excited about these stars because we feel that they are, how it's so smooth, the material, you can see it looks like a cookie. It's perfect. So we're very excited about potentially bringing their mix here to the US, because our mandate is not to use materials as incredible as these. So we're trying to really bring technology. The French have found this incredible solution. These are the ones that were 3D printed and we presented during Art Week, and now we're going to go into that. So the amphibious strategy, we just saw water, but now we're coming out of the water. Why? Because we need to act like hackers, and in Miami Beach, Art Basel is a very big moment where all eyes are in Miami. So we ask ourselves, how do we leverage from that opportunity? We have to make the invisible visible. One of the things that we as humans fear, it's crazy to think that the deepest layer of the ocean is called Hades, like the god of the underworld, because we are hardwired to look up and not look down. And we fear, the water is a place where you can fall, where you can drown, and it's, where Hades lives. So for us, it's important to make the invisible visible, and come ashore and bring our installations to life and teach people about the importance of basically protecting our treasures. We are intimately connected to the ocean. We wouldn't exist without the ocean, and the ocean actually needs us today because it's much more fragile than what initially was thought. So these are some of the stars we presented last Art Week. They were a total success. We had, and this is official, 2 billion media impressions with the stars and the elephant migration that we also brought. A lot of schools came. We had 100,000 visitors in 1 week. The whole city collapsed. It collapsed. You couldn't walk, like people couldn't go out. It was a disaster, actually. But it was an incredible success. But the city collapsed because it's a linear city. It only has like one road, that goes north and another one that goes, and it was a giant traffic jam. And also on shore, we have signage strategy because we need to capture all these tourists that are walking in the shore. So we created a very beautiful, with Oma, strategy to teach people about what's out there, to encourage them to learn, to encourage them to get engaged, and of course the phone dimension, which is also very needed, an AR layer that will tell you more about it. Who's the artist, what's growing there, and potentially looking at the underwater camera that will be installed in each of the deployments so you could see what actually is going on if you don't want to go and dive, because a lot of people will not dive. And then land. That's where we become an educational and a marine learning center. So part of our master plan was to analyze the whole span of Miami Beach and select places that were directly aligned with public parks for accessibility. We identified Lummus Park as an interesting place because it's near to our first deployment, but it's also a place that people always go and hang out. So having a place where we could, 3D print up a pavilion, where we would teach and have like choral demonstrations, how do we print our structures, teach them also about safety, learning safety, have a little gift shop, and basically learn about what's out there and why Miami is so important. And what, because the truth is Miami lives off tourism, and that's the beach. And then the ReefLine Salon is something we also do on land. During, in France, back in the day, the salons were very important. People thought leadership in the city would naturally gather, and they would discuss the future and ideas. And this is something that me personally, I was missing in Miami. We had a lot of that in Buenos Aires, where I came from, and I felt that in Miami it's very siloed, and I didn't find that cross-pollination of the minds. So ReefLine is a perfect excuse to invite important thought leadership, interesting people, and create a mix, a mix of artists, of policymakers, of politicians, of philanthropists, to just, with a glass of champagne and informally, discuss ideas. I really love this concept of reclaiming imagination as a form of civic infrastructure, because I think it's our biggest capital, is imagination, and it's the beginning of everything. Everything we see here was once imagination. So, and Einstein said it, not me. So, and before being an incredible scientist, you also need to be and think artistically, because I think like the true spectacular scientists are the ones that can really think, different. We have an ocean justice scholarship because, of course, we want to promote access. There's 80% of the children that live in Miami haven't come haven't been in the beach, which is incredible. So ocean justice is paramount to us, and we have a little scholarship. It's not a lot. It's a $10,000 scholarship that we give to someone that we think is an incredible ambassador for the oceans and someone that inspires their generation to take action. That's Bodhi Patil, a dear, dear, dear friend now, an incredible ocean guardian. So how else can we reach and tap into the structure of the arts, which is, to me, I call it the Santa Claus effect. So rather than going from the bottom to the top, we go from the top to the bottom, and that's the arts. The arts are there, right at the tip. They connect everything and everyone, crossing all social and countries, and it's a universal language. So we decided that we wanted to be more democratic for phase 3 and not handpick the artists we loved, but to make a process that was a process informed differently. So we came out with this Environmental Arts Award that we're going to launch in a couple of months. We haven't presented, this is the first time I talk about it in public. And the Arts Award, we put together a committee of 20 nominators. And these nominators are very interesting people, from Ines Katzenstein at MoMA, who just wrote an incredible book on art and environmentalism, to the director of the Kochi Biennale in India. So people from all over the world that will propose 2 to 3 artists that have climate as part of central to their practice. And once we have those 60, more or less, artists making a proposal that we will, of course, pay them a small stipend to do so, we will pick 5. And those 5, a jury will pick 5, and a jury with an advisory committee that is made of scientists. And those 5 artists will bring them to Miami for a crash course, marine ecology, hybrid reef making, and the winner will be the one we ultimately deploy. So the winner will get to have their structure made. And hopefully we can make more than one. So that's the Blue Arts Award. Art Week was such a success that the United Nations called us. We want to install the star in the Heart of the Ocean conference in Nice. And we said yes. So we are 3D printing right now. The star will be installed at the Albert I Plaza. We're having an interesting ReefLine panel. And the star will be deployed, hopefully, that's the will, in Nice. So there's a twin star in Nice. And this is what we want. This is exactly what we want, the ripple effect. We want to connect the stars. This is the marine acupuncture we're talking about. The stars, which are such a pop icon, they start connecting people. And then I cannot explain how children naturally gravitate to the stars. And because it's such a beautiful thing, right? It's poetry. So these are the ones that we're making in France. This is how we fundraise. So we encourage people, for example, in Miami, we fundraised $250,000 just telling people, adopt a star, adopt a coral, and then we'll put your name in the star. And that's how we make things happen. So we're a hybrid. We, of course, have grants, but we're all the time looking for ways to maximize impact. And this, we found a very successful strategy. So our ambition is to be a model for the future and to be a blueprint for the world. Not because ReefLine is the solution to the world's problems, but it's an example of how we can come up with solutions. That's what we love. We ultimately are a platform for collaboration. And I think collaboration is the antidote to all this like me moment. There's a lot of science behind this. This is a very formal study, recent study of 2018. But in Florida alone, there's around $10 million per kilometer in return on investment with hybrid reef making. So climate justice is something that to us is very important because in the end, the climate crisis we're living is a crisis that is based in global inequality, where the North has a very strong extractionist policy, and then the people that do the less harm, they suffer the most. So there is an imbalance right now, which is putting us in a very fragile, short-sighted moment where, we're prioritizing quick return on investment, and we are jeopardizing long-term, like future generations' inheritance. So who will we be? We will be remembered by our grandchildren as who? The people who solved it, or the ones that ended up burying it, So I like this, like to prioritize the we, above the me. And ultimately being that thing, which is the ocean literacy, which is teaching people about how we're all interconnected, how the ocean is the biggest climate solution there is. It is the biggest carbon sink. It is the biggest temperature equalizer, and it's a giant resource. So, as I said before, we want to be a learning experience rather than a tourist attraction. And then what's next? Back to the water. So what's next is the deployment, save the date, whoever can come to Miami, first week of September. We will be deploying during 4 days. Each of these cars is 22 tons. And we're going to make a giant party in the beach and in the water. So we're going to have a boat and people will be able to watch the deployment from the boat, and whoever wants to be on the beach, they watch it from the beach. It will be a little far from the beach. But these deployments are very exciting. They're very technical, and we just want to have a celebratory moment. So I think that's it. These are some of the schools that come and visit us, and we put these QR codes for whoever wants to download a catalog or visit the website. So that's a ReefLine in a nutshell. Thank you. Thank you.
Wow, that was excellent, Ximena. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you all for being here. You know, when I have to confess that when I first saw your project, I was very jealous. I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. And the jealousy wasn't just the scale. And you guys also get a lot of attention. You're very good at that, and congratulations, because it's very important. But also the multidisciplinary aspect, the fact that it's very complete, it's very whole. You have this wonderful collaboration, and I think it's very important, collaborations, right? How do you bring all of these people together to create something? And it's one thing to come up with a vision, but it's a whole nother one to implement it. Yeah. Like you can have that idea, and then as you said, how did I get myself into this mess? So so what was the moment when you realized, like, what led you to think you could actually do this? Because you had that idea, but how did there's a moment when you realize, oh my God, we can do this.
Thank you. I think it was a very specific moment, which was when we won the Night Arts Challenge Award. Because until then, I wasn't afraid of the idea because I knew it was complex, but I was coming like from doing this large-scale district, which was like $1 billion project that took many years in the making, and it was incredibly complex. And I had been the cultural master planner for the Underline, which is a 10-mile-long linear park, and I learned a lot about policy there. So I think that the moment that Victoria Rogers from Nike Foundation called me and said, I'm going to give you the award, and I want you to know I'm giving it to you because it's you. Because if anybody else would have told me this idea, I think the idea is genius, but if anybody else would have told me this idea, I wouldn't have given it to them, because I think you can make it happen. And to today, I owe Victoria her leap of faith. Because then I thought, like, if Knight sees legs into this, then, you know.
Yeah. No. I mean, and when you have that validation, it brings others, right? There's that, like, that moment of courage that breeds more courage, which we're seeing here at this institution. So, and I love the fact that this also started with this idea of hacking the system, right? That you had, you know, you when we had our first conversation, you mentioned how Miami's built on coral, and the hack. Can you just talk a little bit about the hack a little more, because you mentioned it earlier?
I think it's very Argentinian to think like a hacker, you know, because we permanently need to hack solutions because we are always in uncharted territories, crisis, and imagine. I can't even begin to explain. So I think it's very Argentine to think on how to create solutions or resources or ways which are not the typical, you know, Excel grid. And art for me has always been that tool, because art has this capacity. Once I met this very beautiful arts curator. He passed, very interesting man, and he told me, did you realize that art is the most powerful passport in the world? And I said, I had never thought about it that way. And he said, well, think about Titanic. Why did Leonardo DiCaprio could come from the bottom of the ship to sitting with Kate Winslet at the top of the ship in the, like, billionaire's table? It's because he was an artist. And it's true. art has that power. Art has the power to open doors where doors don't exist. And I think that's a hack. I think we used art because if you think about it, it's interesting because ReefLine doesn't fall in any neat category because we have a cultural grant. So theoretically, it's about art. But we are using a hybrid reef permit to make it. So we're kind of sitting into science and art. But it was the arts that actually unlocked the funds and the imagination of people, and it was the arts that got us the vote of the people. Because if we would have gone to the people saying, oh, let's make concrete circles with holes, they wouldn't have agreed. So I think art is the hack.
And also, I mean, Miami now has seen the success of any city in this country, particularly. Miami feels the success of art and what art can bring. I mean, Art Basel has been running now for over 20 years and has really become a catalyst and reframed discussion, I mean, of what's possible in a city. So having, worked in the public realm a lot, I did not envy thinking of your project. It must have been like a permanent nightmare. I mean, I just can't imagine all of this regulatory things. And even when the city's with you, they're not, right? And even when the people are behind you, they're not. So I'm wondering, can you talk about, pushback? Because the fact is that when we're doing something in public space, we can't make everybody happy. You just can't, right? And that's not the point either, because if you do, then you might as well just leave the sand there, because that's, right, So what, who was against you? Who was pushing back against you?
That's a great question. ReefLine is super complex, and that's why one of the first things I had to do was assemble a team, and a team of very smart and experienced people. Brandy's here with me. She's the executive director. Brandy comes from the city of Miami Beach. She used to run art and public places in Miami-Dade. Then she was the director of cultural affairs in Miami Beach. So I had to assemble a team that understands policymaking, how a city thinks, how a city acts. And I think the pushback we had was, we didn't have a lot of pushback. We had one big pushback, which was the surfers, which I found funny because there are no waves in Miami, except when there is, exactly. It's like there's a couple of waves every once in a while, and especially in hurricanes, which, by the way, it's illegal to surf during hurricanes, but they love it. So the surfers started asking, we need, your structures will ruin our wave, which we found hilarious. But we had to take them seriously because they are our neighbors. They are water lovers like us. So we did. We showed them there's already 20 structures down there that no one is even aware of. And we went to the sustain tank to test the tank. But it was kind of like a throw-off because I felt, we're doing all of this. We worked for 4 or 5 years pro bono to do this project, to give back to the city. And it was like a bunch of people saying no because of the wave. Is that like me or we moment, right? Mm-hmm. So I found that we took their concern very seriously, and we actually sacrificed a part of our permit so they would surf in their place with no reef line under them, which was a big sacrifice.
How much?
A lot. Maybe 60% of our permit.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. So you had more than 7 miles originally?
No, we don't have 7 miles today. Today we have from South 5th from the tip, South Point, to north of 4th.
4th Street in Miami, yeah.
From there to 4th Street, we left it all for the surfers.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, we were generous.
Yeah.
We could have fought back, but we didn't want to. We wanted to embrace, we wanted to be good neighbors, and we were.
And you left the area where the surfers that they wanted.
Untouched.
This is what they feel is their prime surf spot.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then we have a little bit, I wouldn't say pushback, but I think that all of these governing agencies and regulatory agencies, they have a very traditional way of doing things. And then we come, I'm not a scientist, I'm not a marine biologist, I'm not a marine engineer, and then these people come, and they want to do art underwater. And it's normal, that they at the beginning they're concerned or distrustful. So we had a lot of education to do, and I think they're excited. They've been supportive. They've been they are excited about new materials, about new ways, but it took time. And I can't think of other pushback. Yeah.
Thank you. No, because it's always a tricky thing. And in many ways, anything in public, whether in the built environment, whether it's art or a building, is an imposition, right? And we can't just stop building things. We can't stop art because of, we want to be as considerate and thoughtful as possible. But then at some point, we have to assume a leadership role and do what we need to do. So it's a tricky thing, doing it without being arrogant, but without folding either.
Yeah. I consider sometimes being arrogant, but I don't think it will get us anywhere. Like sometimes I consider, okay, you know what, let's just do it. But we are working on, we need, it's a very political and very complex, and we need, everything is very white glove, and we do everything by the book. The truth is, we work very close with the city of Miami Beach. The city is excited about the project, and they've been incredible partners, from the mayor to the city manager to the guy that, because imagine, we have taxpayers' dollars. So the level of grant reporting that we do is crazy. So they handhold, it's new for the city too. They've never done this before. And we have, the way it works, those 5 million is really complex, because we don't have 5 million, because every deployment is like $1.5 million or $2 million. And we're small, we're a startup almost. And we are in startup mode. So the city advances us the funds. So we show what we need to spend, we give it to them, it's kind of like an allowance. And then we report back. And this is how it works. So max we can ask is 500,000. So the city has been an amazing partner at hand-holding us through the process. We made it like, we're like one team, but of course they are the city and they need to do everything by the book. So it's been a learning process.
Yeah, I'm sure. I would love to dig in a bit into the expert artist, your team assembling, because when you have clear and stated goals, it's almost the antithesis of art, right? We've all have grown up with this idea of art for art's sake, and then in a way, this position you are taking, I've taken, is very contradictory to that. We're actually asking artists to be practical, which isn't always a good idea, and to come up with solutions, right? And it's not easy to find artists who can do it. It's not even easy to find artists who want to do it. I've had artists who have flat out rejected, like, that's not what I do. I'm about the poetry, so when you have clear goals, you have to balance them: environmental concerns, artistic freedom, expert opinion, budget, right? This is all a lot that you're navigating. You're smiling. So can you talk about that balancing, that role of being the mediator? Because sometimes, I found myself, sometimes that's what I feel like I'm doing. The institution wants one thing, the artist wants another, and I'm in the middle. It's like we're the cartilage in between the bones, and we have to figure out, okay, what's best for the project. And I also feel, in my case, it's also what's best for the art.
Yeah. Thank you, Pedro, for that. And I'm sure you have a really good answer yourself to that question. I'm sure you do, because there's no one single answer to this. But if you think about it, our mandate is to do underwater sculptures. So being a marine habitat is not part of our mandate. And that's why Leandro didn't make one single hole in his cars. Yeah. When he we could be doing like sculptures, and they not be marine habitat, because they would still be serving the purpose of the permit. But we wanted to go a step beyond and enhance the marine environment, and we're asking the artists to consider that. So in the case of Leandro, we studied the cars with corals, but Leandro had a lot of creative freedom in that sense. Other artists, I think we need to work. They do need to work with artificial reef making parameters. So there is a design criteria, because certain things, they have to be a certain weight, a certain size. If you want a hole, it has to be, the biggest hole on the top, the other with the smallest at the bottom. There's a lot of criteria. But I think there's a kind of artist that loves that. Like, me being a creative, I love working with limitations. I feel that limitations are there to make us like excel.
To guide you, they're parameters,
And they're meant to, they make you think harder, you know? So the limitations we have are not that, it's like a square with a weight, basically. It's not that challenging. So there is some creative freedom inside that criteria. Of course, and this is something we tell and ask ourselves a lot, and we don't have the answer, which is when we think about ReefLine is a line. So that line, and we're speaking a lot about storytelling, and we're speaking a lot about art and telling, having an important or interesting message, how to engage people. So I've given this a lot of thought. Like, is ReefLine a short tail book where each deployment tells a story of its own? Is it a novel that eventually it evolves and it goes from the catastrophic cars to hope? I don't have the answer. We're still thinking. But this is how we think. We try to engage the artist in that thought process. And I think a lot of these questions that you just asked me will start to coming afloat and start to be unveiled with the award. Because the award, so far we've been a little bit niche, and everything has been like, Leandro's cars today, if I had to make them, I would have made them totally different. But I had to learn. We all had to learn. And it's been complex, and now we know. So I think this process of learning and innovation is something also tech is, growing, is something inherent to the ReefLine. But the overall arching story is the story that I really would like to be more clear on, and I'm not yet very clear on, which is the larger curatorial vision. And that's why we're inviting all these smart people to chime in. Yeah.
No, it's funny. Leandro's cars, when I saw them at first, I thought, I snorkel, scuba dive, and I realized, there are no holes. There's nowhere for the fish to hide.
Yeah.
And I wasn't sure at first, but you've explained it beautifully, and it functions very well as a place for coral to live and grow. But then your other projects, the stars and others, do have those apertures where the fish can hide. Now, there's also, this is what I did a little reading, and I talked to some people. So sometimes, coral fight each other for territory.
Yes.
They're not, like, we just look at them and, they're so pretty, but they're actually competing for territory, and they attack each other.
Yeah.
So how is that being negotiated, between your coral experts, the artists, to figure out the palette?
So the cars have that distance, the territorial distance, like the way they're studded is to give them it's like planting trees, like you can't plant them too close because none of them will be like really strong, so they do compete. Our coral scientist, I think, is one of the most brilliant coral scientists in the world. He's the one that discovered the super corals. There's in the port, in the Miami port, there's these corals that they live on what kills all the others. They're like the superheroes, and they've been there for a long time, like 20 years, and they're thriving, and nobody really knows why. They're hybrids. So Colin has been studying them and knows a lot about how to breed which coral in which environment. But we are looking to be a coral testing resiliency site. So for us, and that's what I love to be here, because one of the things that we love the most is to share what we learn, with institutions that actually care about what we're doing. And that also falls into place with universities that do a lot with marine science. So we are becoming like a testing lab for schools. It's very difficult to get an artificial reef permitted, especially offshore, like a main city in the U.S. So a lot of these universities, they have laboratories, but they don't have testing sites. So we are excited to be testing sites because there is no holy grail of coral science. There is no one single solution, but it's a system of solutions that need to be taken in place. And ReefLine is kind of like a good underwater laboratory to test that.
Yeah.
Me parece me fui por las ramas.
No, this is perfect. Thank you. I wanted, well, I'm curious, that you're having a party in early September. when do you expect to reach critical mass? When do you expect to have, will you be planting coral on the trees once they're settled? Coral on the cars, once Leandro's cars? When do you expect to have critical mass?
I think in the next 2 to 3 years, we will have phase 1, 2, and 3 deployed.
Wow.
So it's one phase per year because it takes time. And it will, the marine life to thrive on a structure, they will be colonized like in 6 months. But
Okay.
we won't start out planting corals until the 3rd month. Because despite using, and this, Colin says it's a myth, but this is where you really, like different scientists have different opinions. So I guess part of our program is also to go and measure, what's going on. And it's part to go and really see how these things are doing and what can be done better and which are thriving and which are not. But I assume that for next summer, so this summer we're deploying. We're out planting probably 3 months after. The next summer we will be deploying the stars and the heart. So 3 years from now, hopefully you'll have like a fully colonized site.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Fantastic. And you talked a little bit about the artists. How do you pick the artists? How does that process with the curator?
It was organic. So the first Leandro was, let's give an afterlife to concrete coral because it made sense. The second one was Petroc himself, the heart of Okeanos. It was Petroc himself that came with the heart of the whale and proposed it. And I thought it's so perfect because it's kind of like giving back to the oceans.
I also love that one because the valves are perfect for marine habitat.
And it's the biggest heart in the animal kingdom. It's just, it just felt it belonged there. And then there are 7 oceans. There are 7 seas, not oceans. And, when a sculptor makes a sculpture, they make 7. And then they keep the 8 if the artist copy. So we started, heart of Okeanos, heart of Pacific. We have the Atlantic, the Pacific, the Indian. So it all kind of like connected. And the whales do sail the one ocean that we have.
Yeah.
So, and then the stars, we really needed more habitat. We needed to sprinkle stardust,
Yeah.
And the stars became that. And we also wanted a Miami native artist. We wanted to celebrate. We don't want to be like importing all blue chip artists. We want to be inclusive and celebrate local talent. And Carlos and Alberto, who's his partner and the architect in the piece, they were in the 80s dancing with Madonna in Miami. Like they're that type of artist that they were always there. And they were always part of the interesting cultural life of Miami since its origins, like 80s, 90s, 2000s, big advocates of the city. So we wanted to recognize them. And they came with this idea of the star, which is such a beautiful symbol.
Wonderful, wonderful. And now you have 7 miles, 11 kilometers.
Yes.
That's a lot.
That's a lot.
And you mentioned the stars will be the connective tissue that kind of bring it all together.
Yes.
And Oma's project, that is still being developed.
So Oma's project is the barrier model. So the stars are biohabitats, but Oma is more a protective barrier to protect the installation. So it's kind of like a spine bone.
Okay. All right, perfect. That's excellent. And, I think what is most moving about this kind of project is this idea of lived experience, right? And so I just did a project with Julien Charrier, and Julien loves to project parts of the world that are remote, inaccessible, that most of us will never visit, jungles, middle of the ocean, and to create an emotional link. And I think that that's really important because so few of us have, 80% of the kids in Miami have never been to the beach, right? So how can they develop a link to the ocean and an understanding if they've never been in it? So in a way, you're creating that experience that could provide that emotional link, and I think that that's critical. And you mentioned that about a bit about that. I also feel like you said that numbers don't convince people. You're absolutely right. And I think that's really one of the challenges that the experts have, right? They come with their data and with their information, and they want to convince us by, sometimes it feels like boring us to death, but in reality, these artists can provide a compelling narrative. They can provide something that makes it cool and interesting, that is much more convincing. So you have the data side, and then you have the experience side. Can you talk a bit about both?
It's interesting to think of how the arts can play such an interesting role in rewriting the narrative, and art has that power to tap into the public sentiment in a very different and emotional way, because I think the world has become numb to numbers, and art is here to help us tell a more compelling story, definitely. I saw those children engage with the stars during those 100,000 visitors that came. Many of them were schools with their teachers, and they came alone. We didn't invite them. They were just like the teachers learned about it. And now that we're showing the star in Nice, we were yesterday with the people of the city of Nice. They were asking us, can we leave them up so we can bring the schools? So I think that art plays such an enormous role in, I believe in the art. I think it was Marcel Duchamp that said that art heals. I believe in the healing power of the arts. And going back to the conversation of the actual artworks, I worked as a curator for a very long time, and to me, to find an artwork that is actually doing the work and not representing it only, it's not working with the environment, it's actually the environment and serving the environment, I find it very fascinating. And the fact that ultimately Leandro, for example, is excited about his cars having as much detail as possible because he's excited about nature erasing all the details. So this co-creation with nature is something that is very exciting for the artist as well. And ultimately, nature is the biggest artist, right?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, so.
Of course. Well, thank you. I've been a snorkeler and scuba diver most of my life, and I've seen. I've spent a lot of time in South Florida, and I've seen the first time I looked for a reef, I couldn't find it. It wasn't that it wasn't there. It just, they've degraded so much. Yeah. And so I'm very excited to have a place to snorkel when I go to Miami and something to see. And I even hope the barracuda come back because they've disappeared.
Yeah, it's
so
true.
We'd like to open it up to the public now.
Thank you, Pedro.
Oh, thank you.
Gracias. Divino.
Hi, Ximena. I'm Sophia. I'm from Miami, and
nice.
I witnessed the growth of your project. In 2021, my master thesis was about the ReefLine in Eric Goldenberg's class at FIU. So I know how much it's grown since then. And I also worked in Miami as an architect. And I know how difficult it could be to, we tried to do some projects for mangrove restoration, and it was always a huge challenge because the mangroves block the views from the high rises. So I know that there is always that fight in Miami for, okay, is this going to impact people's experience of the city? Because, for example, in the case of the mangrove, the view is a huge part. So I know the whole problems with the surfers, like I heard about when that happened. So it's more of a comment of thinking about how the way that you framed it was about enhancing the experience of the people and about putting that as a frontal thing. So I know that also working with scientists, sometimes they are very skeptical about this kind of stuff. So I'm curious about, I know you talked a little bit about, juggling, but I know specifically in Miami, there's still a silo of science and art. So I think convincing scientists that this is not just a silly little project that doesn't, because it is so art and so focused on experience of the person, because you are in Miami and you have to focus on that also.
It's true. We had, speaking about pushbacks, not pushback, but skepticism from like the deep academia. But then they offered us to put art in their reefs, which was good, but it took some time. So I think that the scientists, and it's normal, their process is very different to ours. And they have, proof and trial and error, and you can talk about it, Sheila. So they have a very much formal process. And in order to recognize the impact of something, they have to do all this due diligence. And until then, they won't support it. So we do have the support of Diego Lirman from He runs Rescue a Reef, which is he protects like the largest reef in Florida. But they even are skeptical about what they are doing, because the problem coral science is facing is that the problem is so much larger than the corals. Because you could go ahead and restore 1 million corals, but if the sea temperature is bad, or if there is pollution, the corals will die. So that's why I'm saying there's no holy grail. It's a system of solutions that need to be put in place. So of course, protecting the coral is important, but there's a whole other layer. And Diego's seen the things that he's done. You put all these corals and then all the parrotfish come and eat them like popcorn. So how do you protect the baby corals? It's really complicated. But I think that once we're deployed, that will change. I think people sometimes need to see. For us, we're already there. We see it, it's there. We finished the master plan. We're in the future. But until the structures are deployed, until you actually see the successful growth, until you see the impact, I think that will be the game changer with academia.
But I'd like to add that I feel like it's gotten so hard for academics and experts recently, so discredited, so attacked, that there is this moment of desperation on their side too. And having worked with nuclear experts in particular who've had such a hard time getting the public imagination around the threat of nuclear conflict, that they're happy to work with. I tease them that you're so desperate, you're willing to work with artists. But it's also about reframing the narrative.
It's true. It's true. Yeah.
Who's next?
Thank you so much. This was really amazing.
Thank you.
And it's so exciting to hear about your work. I think it's really unique and singular. This idea that imagination is a form of civic infrastructure is something I will carry with me. I've never heard it expressed like that, so thank you for that. I'm curious, I know you've carved like a whole uncharted path, and there are these difficult legal frameworks to navigate, and obviously right now is a moment when legal frameworks are being upended. And I'm curious how you see your work surviving and thriving in this new climate as it continues to change on a daily basis, and what you see for the future of the ReefLine. Thank you.
Thank you for the nice words. Yeah, I'm curious too. I am. Right now, we are very grateful to the funding from the city, because that somehow guarantees us that we will have a successful until third deployment. But we're actively working in securing other grants and other types of funding, because it is a complex, like the chart I showed. There are so many parts to this puzzle. And one of them is the financial side of it, which is that you really need to pull from different revenue streams. We're also thinking about doing things that are more commercial, in the sense that maybe we make like smaller reefs that people could acquire, and then that revenue comes to ReefLine. So having some parts of the ReefLine, or that you could collect, we're giving a lot of thought on how can we create smaller and bigger revenue streams to keep the reef evolving. We, in South Florida, there is a lot of consciousness about protecting the shore. So despite the whole, political environment, there are a lot of grants for hybrid reefs, because they are needed. And also the biggest military bases in South Florida, DARPA. And there's a whole project for hybrid reef protection down there, which is millions of dollars, but like $400, $500 million, because the sea level rise is a reality, and Florida is literally ground zero sea level rise. So we have faith that we will probably be able to work with different organizations in order to keep on securing funds to keep on moving forward. But, nothing is, I don't know. Yes.
Thanks. Hey, yeah, you're amazing. Your work's so major. It's so inspiring and forward. It's beautiful. In a future fantasy way, you mentioned kind of obviously you're focusing on Miami and activating there, but where else in the future could you see expanding into? I know you're doing stuff with Nice and you had a little Abu Dhabi or UAE vibe, but so many ecosystems could benefit from this system. Where do you dream or plan to expand and grow into with this model?
Thank you. It's a great question. We actually have a lot of people asking us. Maldives is asking us for a whole island. We do have some inquiries also from the Middle East. But I think that we want to go where nature really needs this support. So wherever there is fragile ecosystems like the Indonesian archipelago, for example, our star, the one we're presenting in Nice, I'd love it to be deployed there or in Monaco, because also oceanfront cities are the ones that need this type of solution as well. And not just the solution, but the type of storytelling where we're teaching people on how to liaise with the environment in a way that is not harmful, but is positive. So if we had to pick, I think we would pick those oceanfront cities that need the resiliency, and at the same time they need to, rethink their strategy on how they treat their backyard.
Fantastic. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. Pedro Alonzo, Ximena Caminos, thanks so very much.
Thank you. Gracias, Pedro. Muy divino. Me encantaron tus preguntas. Gracias.